A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends, welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And A Course in What is a free weekly podcast that comes out every Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is podcast episode number 40. And we are on Chapter 3, The Innocent Perception, Section 5, Beyond Perception, paragraph 7 on page 45 in the text. And I'm just going to jump right in today and finish up this section. So, paragraph 7, sentence 1, the statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. So this is obviously referring to the Bible, to the Genesis story on day 6, when the Bible says that God created man. And it's interesting to me just to note that he's saying that it needs reinterpreting. He's taking the stories of what a lot of people in the Western world have grown up with, and he's reinterpreting it instead of just saying, it's not true, that didn't happen. In a sense, he's sort of saying that, but in a very gentle approach. I've talked before about how it's much more helpful, and I find this not just in understanding what's happening with A Course in Miracles, but I understand it in my own office as a hypnotherapist, that it's more helpful to reinterpret what people believe to be true than to tell them that their truths aren't true. So I think this is just a gentle approach saying this needs a new interpretation. Sentence 2, image can be understood as thought and likeness as of a like quality. So the statement would read, God created man in his own thought and of a like quality. And as we've talked about before, we were created as an extension of God's love. Therefore, that is our natural function. We were created in that image to extend love just like our Father did. 3, God did create spirit in his own thought and of a quality like to his own. So here he's saying the same thing, I think, that thought being the idea of the same likeness. Since God isn't a body, he didn't create us as a body. We are thoughts in the mind of God, so to speak. Thoughts of love. 4, there is nothing else. As the Course says, we say God is, and then we cease to speak, because there is nothing else. So God and his Son exist in that state of unity and love. There is nothing else. There's only a dream of something else, a perception of dualism. 5, perception, on the other hand, is impossible without a belief in more and less. So again, perception is the level of dualism. It's this world, this dream of separation. And this is a world of perceiving things outside of us. In perception, there's always going to be more and less, because there's divisions and fragments. Once we had the thought of separation, we felt that there was something missing. So there was less within. And then we see these things outside of ourselves and we think of that as more. So there is more outside and less inside in this dream of separation. That's part of the whole ego thought system. That's part of the dream, that you are lacking, that there is less within you and more outside of you. 6, at every level, it involves selectivity. So at every level within the dream, perception involves selectivity. We are selecting what we will see and how we will interpret what we see. It's all filtered through the ego, through this separation. 7. Perception is a continual process of accepting and rejecting, organizing and reorganizing, shifting and changing. I mean, everything in this world is based on that. Just the fact that we are born into the world as babies, and then every day we are growing more and more, we're shifting and changing. Our identity is shifting and changing with that. The world is shifting and changing as well. There's nothing stable and consistent in this world. Everything here changes because everything is temporary. So it has to shift and change. And because of that, we're constantly shifting our perceptions, trying to find comfort in this shifting, changing world, trying to find that connectedness, trying to find that oneness, that thing that's missing once we got here. 8. Evaluation is an essential part of perception because judgments are necessary in order to select. So, these words, judgment, evaluation, perception, selection, they're all necessary in this world, but obviously not in oneness. What is there to judge or to evaluate or select in love? And that's interesting because we select certain people to love, but the Course is saying that we should love everyone equally. That there is only one love, and that's God's love extended to us and through us. Love only knows love. So notice he's not saying that these things are bad, judgment, evaluation, perception, selection. They are necessary here. In fact, the Course uses all of those judgments, those perceptions, those evaluations, our ability to select, to help us out of the illusion. All of that is, again, reinterpreted by the Holy Spirit when we surrender our experiences, when we surrender our perceptions, our relationships, whatever's occurring. Those things then become our lessons of forgiveness. And the Course says forgiveness is selective remembering. It's really forgetting the past and remembering that only love is real in this present moment. Paragraph 8, sentence 1. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect equality? And he goes on to answer that in the next sentence. 2. Perception becomes impossible. Because as we talked about, in knowledge, in heaven or oneness, there is nothing but love. That's the realm of non-dualism. 3. Truth can only be known. So without that dualism, only truth exists. And here's that word again, known. From knowledge or knowingness, all of those words are synonymous with heaven or oneness with God. We all know when we are in truth. It resonates deep in our soul. It is deeper than perception. We know it. It's a feeling. And that sure knowingness that we've all felt is a reflection of that knowingness of our truth. Just the fact that we know something is missing and that we're seeking something means that there's an awareness somewhere deep inside of us of knowingness. 4. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. So it's sort of saying the same thing in a different way. There's no separation or division or fragments or change or shifts. All of it, in truth, is equally true. And knowing any part of it is to know all of it. In this world, we can know one thing and know another thing and know this thing and that thing, etc. But in oneness, we only know that unwavering truth. 5. Only perception involves partial awareness. So partial awareness meaning even in the dream, again, we can't leave oneness completely. We can't totally leave our truth, like a cloud that blocks out the sun. That darkness can be perceived as if it's our reality, but the sun is always shining. And so it is here, sort of like that idea that we only use 10% of our brain. We only use 10% of our awareness. There's another perception, a truer perception, that helps us to see more clearly, so to speak. 6. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception because partial knowledge is impossible. So that knowledge is greater than any of the laws governing this realm of duality. Once we bypass the clouds, we can't partially be in the sun. It's all around us. The sun is all that exists. It's a clear, sparkling day. There are no clouds. It can't be partly cloudy and be a totally sunny, clear day from above the clouds. Partly cloudy only exists in the ego from a lower perception. Partial knowledge is impossible. 7. It is all one and has no separate parts. So I think we explained that. 8. You who are really one with it need but know yourself and your knowledge is complete. So what does it mean to know yourself? It means to identify outside of the ego thought system. To identify with yourself outside of the body. To really know yourself. That knowledge that you exist beyond the clouds, that you are one with the source of that light, that sun. Once you know yourself, that knowledge is complete. 9. To know God's miracle is to know Him. And earlier, Jesus said that we are miracles of God. So to know another is to know our brother, who is also a miracle of God. And that is to know God. Meaning we see His truth. We don't perceive His mistaken perceptions and His mistaken behaviors as the truth of who He is. That's to know God. Because that person is just a split off part of God. We are seeing him or her as God sees him. And when we're doing that, we're in our right mind. We are extending love, just as God extended His love to us. Paragraph 9. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. That's a really important sentence. I mean, that really sums up how we roll the carpet of time back up through forgiveness. It's the healing of the perception of separation. That is what forgiveness does. It's healing. To know our brother as God knows him is healing. What else can heal separation but a change in our mind, a shift in perception? And this means that it's our job today to forgive, to think of who we are holding a grievance against, and ask that we see that person differently, that we're able to forgive and move past those clouds in our mind to know ourselves so that we can know God. Forgiveness is really self-serving. You do it for yourself. Of course, the entire sonship is healed when we forgive. But we're so egocentric that really we just do things for ourselves mostly, don't we? 2, correct perception of your brother is necessary because minds have chosen to see themselves as separate. So this is an important word. We have chosen to see ourselves and others as separate. So if we chose that, that means we can choose differently. We chose separation, and now we can and we must choose healing, choose oneness. There's really no other reason that we're here. That choosing of forgiveness, that healing of our mind is an active process of participation. It's not just going to happen, We have to be diligent. And if you don't want to forgive somebody, if you're having a really hard time forgiving someone, then ask to want to even begin to see that person differently. Just start where you are. Fully accept yourself in your process of unforgiveness. Sometimes that's the best place to start. 3, Spirit knows God completely. So you could substitute the word you. You know God completely. There is a part of you that knows. That's where your point of power is. That's where your power to perform miracles comes from. 4, that is its miraculous power. 5, the fact that each one has this power completely is a condition entirely alien to the world's thinking. The world would tell you that you are lacking, that you're not good enough, that you're unworthy, that you're not rich enough, you're not attractive enough, you're not smart enough. Just by its nature of separation, there's the idea of lack, and that idea takes myriad forms. But it's all the same. That's the world of separation. That's the world's thinking. 6, the world believes that if anyone has everything, there is nothing left. So this world is founded on the scarcity principle, which says there isn't enough. You have to take to get yours. That's the way of the ego. The spirit is, in order to get, you have to give. The ego would say, you have to take. There's not enough. 7, but God's miracles are as total as his thoughts because they are his thoughts. So that's another way of saying, but you're complete. God's miracles, you are as total as his thoughts because you are his thoughts. We just need a different vision, a new way of looking at ourselves and each other. We see everyone, including non-human animals, as ourselves because oneness is total. It's total. The Course talks about total freedom or total bondage. There's nothing in between. Paragraph 10, sentence 1. As long as perception lasts, prayer has a place. So now he's referencing paragraph 6 from our last podcast episode. We did that one paragraph, you may recall, and he's bringing it back to this idea of prayer. So as long as we think we are separate and have separate numerous problems, prayer has a place. We wouldn't need prayer in oneness, right? So it's not the supplication type of prayer really that he's saying we need, but the true prayer of communion, that communion with and that communion in remembrance of our Father, of our truth. It's in that prayer that we know we are not lacking, that we are complete. 2, since perception rests on lack, those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement and given themselves over to truth. Well, that would be all of us, wouldn't it? Those who perceive have not totally accepted the atonement. Well, I perceive. I'm sure you perceive. We all perceive. I think there's very, very few exceptions to that. So he's saying we have not totally accepted the atonement, and that's why we're here, is to make a different choice. 3, perception is based on a separated state, so that anyone who perceives at all needs healing. Yeah, so that healing is the healing of that separated state. 4, communion, not prayer, is the natural state of those who know. So communion or oneness is our natural state. And we're talking about states of mind, right? The way we look at the world, the way we look at others, that communion with God, that oneness in our mind is our natural state. Those who know, meaning those who are enlightened, those who have transcended their ego thought system, have healed their minds, don't have specific problems. They see the general problem of separation and the general solution of accepting the atonement, of awakening from the dream. They may live in the world and they have things to do every day, but they've transcended their perception of separation in their mind. 5, God and his miracle are inseparable. So God and you, God and your brother, God and non-human animals, they're not separate. God and his miracle are inseparable. 6, how beautiful indeed are the thoughts of God who live in his light. How beautiful indeed are those who live in his light, who live in their right mind, the light of their right mind. That light is love. 7, your worth is beyond perception because it is beyond doubt. That would be a really beautiful affirmation or mantra to say, my worth is beyond perception, or my worth is beyond my perception. Doubt only exists in dualism. 8, do not perceive yourself in different lights. So don't perceive yourself any other way than an innocent child of God, because once you perceive yourself that way, your worth will extend from that thought, and you'll then extend that worthiness, that healing to others in the way you think of them or interact with them. That's how the world begins to awaken. You remember who you are. You remember what's real. 9. Know yourself in the one light, where the miracle that is you is perfectly clear. So it takes some vigilance to know yourself in that one light. If it was easy, we all would do it. The ego massively fights against this idea. In fact, the world was set up so that we didn't know ourselves as light. But with the willingness to see yourself differently, with the desire to want to live in the world in a different way, by asking the Holy Spirit to help you see yourself and others differently, you can't but come to know that truth about yourself. It becomes perfectly clear. Okay, so we finally finished this section. Took a few podcast episodes, but we did it. We're going to move on to the next section in the next podcast episode. So I hope you'll join me next Tuesday. And if you would like to stay in touch with me, I love that. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy if you are on Facebook. And we also have a Facebook page just for this podcast, and that is facebook.com/A Course in What. And you can also contact me through my website, which is cynthiamorgan.us. If you want to send an email, it's acourseinwhat@gmail.com. And until next time, if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.